This is the Roots and All podcast, and I'm your host, Sarah Wilson. Join me as I talk about all aspects of gardening with some of the top horticulturists from around the world. Hello and welcome to Roots and All. This week I'm speaking to Juliette Goggin, perfumery consultant to some of the most recognised brands in the world, upcycling and reusing champion, owner of the cosmetics company Handmade by Juliette, and author of the books Handmade Beauty and Handmade Spa. We talk about how you can use plants from your garden to create products that are natural, inexpensive, easy to make, and that actually work.
When I was a child, I was introduced to doing a bit of gardening, like lots of people who come on to talk to you on their podcast. And I remember growing in a little tiny patch of garden. And I, as I say, I was one of four, so we all had a bit of garden. And mine was the one that I actually grew things in. I'm not sure that my brothers really did. But I remember growing daffodils and radishes, which I thought were amazing because I seeded them and then they came up and you could eat them. And I think from that time on, I was very interested in flowers and plants and things. And I used to go around identifying those with my observer's book as we lived out in the country. When I was a bit older, I was lucky enough to get a job working for a fragrance manufacturer. The sort of people that most people don't realise exist because they make the perfume that goes into lots and lots of different things. And I was really lucky to work in what's called fragrance evaluation. And that also involved me travelling to the other headquarters occasionally of the company, which meant I went even to France and to Holland. And it was great. It was really, really interesting. So I learned about fragrance, how to describe it, how to memorise it, that sort of thing. And also, to a certain extent, the sort of what was commercially good. And that led me into working in product development, which I did, working for contract manufacturers and then eventually working for myself. So I suppose there's always been this kind of constant thread of working with fragrance products, natural products, that kind of thing. Later on, I really began to make my own products and also to write 3 books.
The first thing I thought when I read your books is, are you doing yourself out of a job?
Yes and no.
Because you give away a lot of your trade secrets and they are about using kind of natural products to make your own stuff, and they are relatively simple and seems as if they're really accessible and most people can do them. So what was the kind of idea behind sharing all that knowledge?
I had this idea. I'd already written one book, which was an upcycling book, and I always collaborate with someone else on my books. Writing books is really, really hard work. It takes ages, and you're usually trying to do another job at the same time. So I don't know why anybody does them, actually, but there we go. I did. And I really enjoyed writing my upcycling book with my friend Stacey. But then I thought, well, I've always worked in fragrance products. It would be great to write a really good book for people to make things themselves. So I spoke to my friend Abby, who had worked for many years at the Body Shop doing all sorts of cutting edge things with natural products, and herself had her own formulating business, and persuaded her to work on it with me, which we did, which was great. So she was able to add a lot of her knowledge, fill in gaps in my own and that sort of thing. And we came up with the book and we got a publisher, and they especially loved the fact that the back of the book, which you've probably noticed, is a complete sort of glossary of terms. Everything that we include, there's a description how you use it, what it's called. It's what is known in the industry as its INCI name, INCI. That's how you look it up and find out what it is. So we did a lot of extra work, if you like, in doing the book. And I also got involved in the photo shoots for all the pictures, worked with the stylists, and it was great. Hard work, but it was really great. And Abby said to me, she said, if we're going to write a book for people, let's write them a really good book and stop them getting the wrong ideas or bad recipes. And I thought that was a very good way of thinking about it, actually. And I was never going to write another one, except that the publishers got in touch with me very soon after the publication of Handmade Beauty and said, would you like to write another book? And I said, God, no. Why would I do that? And they said, because you're going to sell lots of this book. It's doing really well. You know, it's going into foreign languages. And I loved the thought that people in different countries all over the world were reading the book. So I said, oh, right then. And I persuaded Abby that we'd do another one. So we did another one. We did Handmade Spa.
Nice. And obviously, it's about making your own products. Why is that a good thing? And are they kind of better than what you can buy?
That's a complicated question. I don't want to denigrate anybody else's products at all. And there are lots of mainstream products that are perfectly good. But I think there's something really, really nice about making a product yourself, or also buying a product that is handmade by somebody. It's like anything. It's like buying a good cheese as opposed to a sort of highly manufactured one, or a wonderfully hand-thrown bowl as opposed to something made in a factory in, let's say, China. And to be able to have the ability to make your own cosmetics is a bit like being able to cook, and there's a lot of similarity anyway. So kind of what I'm doing is giving the people the ability to make some of these things. Very simply, some of the recipes are what I call instant. You literally can stand in your kitchen, throw a few things together and come up with a product. And some of them are indeed more complicated. So there's a variety of recipes in the book, between easy ones and more complex ones. And I think it's a great thing for anybody to do, because they can use some ingredients, if you like, that they could have grown in their own garden or their allotment, that sort of thing. And they're a pleasure to use. And it's really nice to have things that are relatively fresh. Some cosmetic products that you buy, they could have been sitting around a long time in the whole manufacturing, warehousing, distribution system. Whereas if you make something, you know the product is better because it's fresher, really.
Interesting. Yeah. Do you think that maybe sometimes puts people off because the products that they're making have got a short shelf life, and if they're using them just themselves?
Well, it depends on the product, because some of them, like a face mask, and I brought you a face mask today. This is what I call a really instant product. Now, this you couldn't keep for too long, but it's so easy to do that it really doesn't matter. And if I tell you that you've pretty much got all of this stuff, well, maybe one ingredient in your kitchen anyway, because this is a yogurt and cucumber mask, and you literally take some cucumber, throw it in your food processor thing, bit of Greek yogurt in there as well. I added some green tea, so when you make your green tea you can just have a couple of spoonfuls, because it's got lots of nice antioxidants and that sort of thing in it. And then you can whiz it up, and the only thing I've included is some kaolin clay. You might even be able to still get this in chemists, I'm not sure, but you can easily get it online, and it's very cheap and it keeps for ages. So then I just whiz it all up again with the kaolin clay, and you get this, which I'm going to pass it to you now. And the first thing you do is smell it. And what does it smell of?
Oh, cucumbers.
Exactly.
Yes, really. Yeah.
Wow. It does that all on its own. You could put some essential oil in there, but actually it really smells of cucumber.
Yeah.
And if you try it, if you just put a bit on, then it feels really cool, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
So you could use this as a face mask. I mean, we're here on a lovely, warm, sunny day. It feels really cooling. You'll find that it will set kind of because of the clay on your face, and it draws out impurities from the skin and things like that. And actually, I don't normally have a lot of trouble with my skin, but sometimes in the summertime, I find I get almost like little bumps under the skin, particularly on my forehead. And I use a mask like this and it gets rid of it. It really does, because the clay draws out from your skin.
I was going to say, do you use your own products, because you've got very good skin?
I always use my own products. Yeah, I do, even down to my own shampoo bars. That's an example of a really nice, fresh product.
That's amazing. That smells gorgeous.
It does,
Yeah,
because you could add an essential oil, but you genuinely don't need to.
No.
You can't believe that cucumbers smell so strong until you whiz them up like that.
Do people want to just eat all your products, though? Is that a problem? Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure it would do you too much harm. I don't know if you'd want it to, but I suppose if you only had a little bit, it would be fine.
I mean, the kaolin clay, I think I can smell that coming through, but I used to have a horse, so I think we used to use it for that, probably in a poultice or something.
Hot poultices on
Yeah.
horses. And kaolin clay is something that people used to use a lot in the past for things like poultices, which I don't know that anybody really knows much about them.
No, I don't think so, and which would be really useful, because especially if you're gardening and you've got splinters, I'm guessing that would be ideal sort of thing. But
that's a really good point. When I was a child, my mother used to put a poultice on if you had an insect bite. It was bread, I think, and it would sort of draw it out. It was really good.
That's a useful tip as well.
Another thing I brought you today as well, and this was sitting in my fridge until I popped over. This is a facial spritz. So it actually contains some fizzy mineral water. If you shut your eyes and just spray your face with it, because it's a hot day, it should feel very, very cooling.
Yep.
And it starts off with having fizzy mineral water, which probably gives it a little bit of extra fizz. It has distilled witch hazel, which you can get in the chemist.
Right.
Still very easy to get witch hazel. That's like in place of something like alcohol, because it gives you that freshness. Then it's got a little bit of glycerin, which will help to sort of make your face feel not dry, and by just spraying water on it, it makes it feel more moisturised. And then I put a little bit of mint oil in there as well, so it gives it a freshness.
Wow.
And that, I tend to leave it in the fridge because you wouldn't keep it forever because you haven't preserved it in any way.
No.
But keep it in the fridge and it will certainly be fine through a sort of period of hot weather for a week or so. And it does just feel
lovely.
I would do it myself.
Yeah, that'd be really good if you were going on holiday, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, exactly. I brought you this as well. I thought you'd like this. This is really a good thing for anybody who does lots and lots of gardening, because it's a hand scrub, and it's foliating hand scrub. You could also use it on your feet if you wanted to, but I have used orange and lemon zest in here. Again, you will be able to smell it. This one is a little bit more complicated than the others I gave you before, because what you actually do is that you put your zested ingredients with sea salt. So just ordinary sea salt, which you can kind of blitz up. And then you can use an oil from your kitchen, like sunflower oil, or though that's not so easy to get at the moment, but rapeseed oil would be very, very good alternative. And then there's some little drop of essential oil. But I also use, in this case, an emulsifier, which is called Olive, which features in the books quite a bit. But you have to melt this. So all of this, you'd actually have to melt it in order to get it to combine together. And then what you have is a scrubby, look a bit like marmalade.
Yeah, it does a bit. Yeah.
The orange, because it's really, really orange,
Yeah,
comes from,
colour.
obviously, the orange rind that we've used. So if you put it on, you can feel it scrubbing, can't you? Because that's the salt. That's the salt doing that. The idea is this: you could use it on your hands. So if you've been out gardening and you've got really awful hands, especially if you've forgot to put your gardening gloves on.
Yeah, a bit like mine.
So you kind of work it in, and that will help to get rid of all the dirt and stuff. You can rub it all in around your cuticles, and that will sort them out as well.
Genius, yeah.
And we'll have to go and rinse it off now. That's the only thing.
All right.
We'll have to rinse it off.
I don't know, I quite like it. Can I keep it?
But, well, the only trouble is you'll find that your hands are a bit oily, because what's happened is you've now got oil and you've got sea salt on there, which is now sort of disappearing. But what it will do is it will make your hands feel really, really much smoother and more moisturised.
It's very rare that you actually put something on your skin and you instantly feel that it's done something, but your gardener's hand cream does that. You instantly put it on. For me anyway, I put it on and I go, oh my, like, I can completely feel the difference.
Yeah, the gardener's hand cream is one of those things, partly because it's called gardeners. There will be people who would never even pick it up because it's called gardeners, and people are literal minded. But actually, because of all the infused oils and things that go in it, it's got a lot of stuff that does a lot of healing. You're not allowed by cosmetic regulations to call things healing. But when you infuse something like comfrey and calendula that's in there, it's doing a job, actually, when you put it on. And the people who buy the gardener's hand cream come back and rebuy it because they really like it. There's so many bad kind of gardening things.
Yeah,
things that they're just rubbish.
Yeah.
Absolute rubbish. And they think if they put the word gardener on them, I mean, I go and pick them up sometimes in shops and can't you do any better than that? It's really, really rubbish.
They are.
Because they think it's just a cheap gift.
Yeah.
But you give somebody a gift that's better, and I deliberately price the hand cream so it isn't stupidly expensive, because I want people to buy it. And they buy it and come back and buy it again.
Yeah, I have to say, I've done that. I've got stung loads of times buying hand products for gardeners, and they have been, without exception, rubbish. And so I wouldn't have bought yours, because I would have just thought, oh, I don't think that's going to work based on previous experience. And then when you bought me one, I was like, oh my God, honestly couldn't believe it. It is so good. I know it's individual as well. People kind of have their own preferences, but it genuinely was very good.
I've got one more thing.
Okay, cool.
Right, this is a foot soak.
Oh.
And so, could you get a bowl with some water in it? Yes. And I'm going to, you could put your foot in it if you wanted, but you don't have to. Right. But you can, otherwise because you'll see something when we put it in the water. Right, so this funny product, it's a little bit like a bath bomb, because you'll sort of see what I mean. In the sense that, can you see it's doing a bit fizzy?
Yeah.
And that's because it contains two ingredients which you would find in a bath bomb, which is bicarbonate of soda and citric acid. And the citric acid and the bicarb together will do this sort of fizzy thing.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't fizz massively because I haven't put huge amounts of it in.
I can see the bubbles. Yeah.
So with this, with your poor feet, because you've been out in the garden and your feet ache, and maybe you're having this one in the winter because your feet are cold and tired and everything as well. So in here is, believe it or not, you take some soap, good soap, like cold process soap like I make, not the other stuff, and you grate it on a grater, and then you add to it some oats, so blitz and porridge oats, again in your food processor thingy. And then I use some shea butter. Shea butter is an ingredient that's really common in cosmetics. It's the only thing in here that perhaps you have to go and get specially. And then the bicarbonate and the citric acid all together. But I also whizzed up some rosemary from the garden, because rosemary is very good for antifungal, that kind of thing for feet. So all of this, results in this powder, because we've whizzed it up, and you can see little bits of green rosemary in there. And I put a little bit of lavender essential oil in there as well. But I hadn't tried it for a while. I tried it out the other evening. I was at home on my own just as well. I found the largest pan, it was what I could find actually, and put some warm water in it, put some of that in, and sat with my feet in it for 10 minutes watching the television by myself. But when I took my feet out and I dried them off, they felt so much softer and really kind of refreshed from it. So I think soaking your feet was something possibly parents and grandparents did, because they probably spent more time on their feet than we did. I remember my ex-mother-in-law having a real thing about trying to look after her feet, because she'd done a job where she stood up a lot. And I think maybe it's something that's worth kind of revisiting now. You wouldn't go in a shop and find a foot soap very easily, but this could also be used in the bath. But honestly, it makes feet feel much, much better.
Yeah, you're right. We don't think about our feet. And honestly, what use are we if they go wrong?
Yeah.
They're so essential that
it would pretty much stop us.
It certainly would have been, I guess, in times gone by.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think they're concerned to look after their feet.
Yeah, very sensible.
Yeah. So there you are. So those are just like examples of things that you can make really easily. The foot soap, because it's a powder, would keep for quite a long time, and you wouldn't necessarily use loads of it, but you could throw it in the bath anyway. And you could keep the hand scrub for a couple of months or so, really.
In the fridge, or just?
I don't think you necessarily need to keep it in there, because actually with this I dried out the zest before I used it anyway, so that means it's much less likely to go off.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if something goes off, you'll know, because it will look off, and then just throw it away. You just wouldn't want to use it, really.
No.
It's like a lot of things that use common sense.
I'm sort of looking at your stuff that you brought with you, and I'm thinking your house must just be full of jars and containers.
Yeah, my house is full of a lot of jars and containers, actually. I have a workshop as well, where I actually make the products and things, because I make candles and all sorts of other things as well, so I do that properly. But at home, yeah. Also because I love cooking as well, so I'm a great one for cooking things and having too much of something and either bunging it in the freezer or giving it to somebody else. There's always a friend who doesn't cook too much and is very happy to be given something. So yeah, I keep jars. I don't just wash them out for the recycling. I keep them really, and all sorts of things. You're dead right.
Yes, I have a big collection of jars for various things. So obviously jars are handy. Is there much else that you need in the way of equipment to do this, or is it all fairly straightforward?
I've mentioned obviously having something like a food processor thing. They're really, really good, because you can whiz stuff up in that, but not really. In the books, there are some recipes and things that tell you about temperature, and you need to use something like maybe a Jan thermometer or whatever to check a temperature. But for a lot of things, they are relatively instant, so they're pretty easy. And look around your kitchen, and it's not just the equipment, it's the ingredients. Most people would have salts. They would have things like honey. I mentioned green tea earlier on that I use in some of the recipes. That was in the yogurt mask, actually. And the herbs in your garden. There are lots and lots of things that once you kind of get your focus on them, there's things that you've got in the house that you can use, mentioned oranges and lemons as well, but things that you grow also. And of course, the great thing about things that you grow is that you know where they've come from. You know that they haven't been sprayed or tampered with in any way. And that's really nice. And it's just lovely to use whatever you have in the same way as you would with cooking.
Yeah, it is, definitely. Also, because things are becoming more expensive, I guess it's quite handy to have this knowledge so that you can I'm
Yes.
assuming in a lot of ways it's cost saving.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, the more you go up the level of product and price, the bigger your cost saving. I have in the past taught classes, and it's one of the things that people ask me. They say, can you save money by doing this? And I said, absolutely, you can. You can buy very cheap products in supermarkets, which are made with cheap ingredients. Once you start buying really good products, they start costing you quite a lot of money. And many of the things in here, you've almost already got. You know, when you zest your orange or your lemon, you're going to use your juice for something else. You know, you're not throwing something away. And you can buy small amounts of things. You can buy even little tiny bottles of essential oil when you want to use those for some things, and they won't cost you an awful lot. And they go a really, really long way. And then actually, when you make something, you will be amazed at how cheap it is. 10 years ago, I was doing a program on Channel 4 called Super Scrimpers. And it was full of ideas to save you money. And we kind of need that again now. And I did a cost to make a lip balm. And my lip balm came out at something like about 15p, I think.
Wow.
And the nearest sort of alternative to buy, which was a natural product, was probably at the time about 3 or 4 quid. So there was an enormous saving to be made, actually. And when it comes to face creams, I would say the saving is even greater, because a good face cream will cost you a lot of money. And you might have to buy a few ingredients for that. But my goodness, you can just keep making face cream, and you can make it for other people. You can do all your Christmas presents by making it yourself.
Moving on.
Yes.
Going on to the ingredients.
Yeah.
Obviously, you mentioned that you've got some things, you're probably going to find a lot of it around your house or your garden. There are some specialist things. Are they relatively easy to find, those ingredients?
Really easy, yeah. These days, there are a lot of companies online who've set themselves up to sell small amounts of ingredients to people who are either small businesses or just the enthusiastic amateur. So frankly, you just Google in cosmetic raw materials and you'll get loads and loads of options. Very, very easy to find. And many of those websites will have recipe ideas and things as well. So there's an awful lot to discover. And I think it's a great thing as well, maybe for people to start doing with teenagers, because once you get teenagers into the idea that, you know, looking after your skin's a great thing to do and letting them understand what's involved, I think it's just lovely for them to be able to do it. It's another skill. And, you know, we need all the skills we can get these days, don't we?
Yeah, that's very true. Obviously, you're incorporating items from the garden into it, and you've mentioned a few different ones. I guess you're looking more at herbs, are you? Is that the kind of, would that be your biggest resource?
Because they're things that people can easily get and easily grow. So the sort of obvious herbs are ideally things like lavender, rosemary, the mints can use a lot. You can also grow things like calendula and infuse the petals, because I use a lot of infused oils in the products that I make. And it's very easy to do, because you basically put the dried flowers, much better to use the dried flower than the fresh one, because you could get some kind of contamination and stuff. We may go off. So you want dried things into oils. And then you can keep it for like a month or so, strain it off, and you've put some of the goodness of that herb into the oil. So you could use it as a massage oil, for example, or depending on the qualities of the herbs, maybe even things like we talked about the feet, you know, massaging into your feet. If you might have a tendency towards things like athlete's foot and stuff like that, you know, there are useful herbs like the rosemary, for example. So there's lots of useful things that you could do. And I think any of those herbs are great. You can also grow things like aloe vera as a plant indoors. And the aloe vera that's inside, you know, when you break off a leaf, it's really, really good for burns and things like that. And sunburn, famously for sunburn. So, yeah, lots of things that people can try, really.
It's interesting that you said about drying your herbs and things. Is there an easy way to do that? Because I think some people shy away from doing it because they're not quite sure.
Yeah, I mean, most people don't have a huge kitchen where they can hang them from the ceiling or whatever. I do have, although I've got a modern boiler, I've still got effectively a boiler cupboard, and not everyone's got these really. And it's not like the old boiler cupboards. They were amazing because they were too hot, because the old boilers gave off an awful lot of heat. They were fantastic for drying things up, but the modern ones will still mean that you've got a warm cupboard. So that's what I would tend to do. When I'm drying something for a recipe, like I mentioned about the dried lemon and orange, you can put it in the oven on a really, really low heat, and that will dry it off. But with herbs, you want to dry them a bit more naturally. So try and find a place where you can perhaps you don't necessarily have to hang them from something, but you can just dry them on a tray. I have fondness for collecting old trays when I go to car boots. I use them a lot in my workshop because we're always pouring things and moving them around on trays. So whenever I see a tray in a charity shop or car boot, I'm straight for it, really. And all you need to do is just lay some newspaper or some kitchen paper, just something that they can sit on, and the flowers as well. Same kind of thing, really, and just put them out of the way somewhere where it's not cold, ideally a bit warm, and a heated room, and then leave them for a few days. And then once you can tell they're dry, then you can put them away, take off the petals, and get rid of the other bits.
And my last question, well, I've got two, if you don't mind. My first one is there anything you need to be careful of doing or not doing?
Well, you always need to be careful about, for example, pregnant women. So if you're going to be using essential oils in particular, look them up. Make sure that you haven't put something in that might be unsuitable for somebody who's pregnant. And there are specific ones that are not great when somebody's pregnant. And always be careful that you know what it is you're actually using. If you're out foraging for something, be sure it is what you think it is. And if you're in doubt, don't use it, because some things can be poisonous that look remarkably like a thing that isn't. So that's the only thing that I would say. I mean, I tend not to forage that much, really, for things outside. I grow what I probably want to use in the garden anyway, so I don't generally take those risks, but some people might.
Yeah, fair enough. And also, the other question I was going to ask, my last question, is if you wanted to kind of convert someone into trying this, I wonder if you could just pick out perhaps one thing that they should try, or one thing that you think once people do it, they're really converted by it because it's so easy or so much better than what you can get.
Well, I think there's something really, really magical about making a cream. Whenever I've taught classes in cosmetics, I tend to give them a variety of different things to make. But I think the thing that everybody wants to make is a cream, because it's a bit like making a mayonnaise. You put into a mayonnaise your egg and your oils and things and your mustard or whatever. And it does this amazing thing when it whizzes up and it turns into an emulsion. And that's what you have with cream. So with the cream, you've basically got your oils, maybe something like shea butter, and you've probably got some essential oil and an emulsifier. It's a bit more complicated because you do have to read a recipe, because you've got to cook your ingredients. And unless you genuinely keep it in the fridge, you need to use a preservative. But to make your own cream is really lovely. And then you can choose, once you've learned the basics, what essential oils you like, or maybe what essential oils particularly are good for your skin. And I think when you've done that, you think, I can actually make a cosmetic now. And it's such a lovely feeling. And I've seen it so many times when I've made it with people and we whiz it up and suddenly it turns into this thing. And I say, just try it. They say, how do you know it's done? Just try a bit and see. And they go, oh, wow, it's really lovely. And those are the things that cost you a lot of money in the shops, because they are gorgeous. And, the skincare companies are clever and they know how to make really lovely products and they have enticing marketing. But you can actually do it yourself. And then if you really want to have, and it suits your skin, patchouli in your face cream instead of rose or lime or something, you can actually choose what you really, really like. And I just think that's a lovely thing to be able to do.
It is. It's very good. Excellent. So if people did want to find out more about you and your work,
you can find me on Instagram. I'm Handmade by Juliette, and you can find my books, which are available online. Unfortunately, not the Handmade Spa anymore because it's out of print, which is really sad. But the Handmade Beauty, which is the one that has lots and lots of cosmetics recipes, that's still very much available.
Thank you very much to Juliette for sharing her knowledge and also some of her beautiful products with me. Thanks to you for listening. And if you try any of Juliette's recipes, let me know. Before I move on to Dr. Ian Bedford, I wanted to ask a favour. I'm looking to do more with Roots and All, and I have quite a following. Lots of you kindly listen to the show, and I'm wondering where to go next with it because, honestly, I get bored easily and I like a new challenge. So is there anything you'd like to see me produce or become involved with? Do you have a burning desire to hear more audio content? More about a particular topic? Read written articles? See a Roots and All book, magazine, video channel? If you have any ideas, please email them to podcast@rootsandall.co.uk. It will take you 2 minutes to email your thoughts, which is nothing really, but I would very much appreciate it. Thank you. Now, over to Ian.
The common gooseberry sawfly can be a troublesome pest of gooseberry, red and white currant bushes. In early spring, the adults, which have yellow bodies and black heads, emerge from pupae, having spent the winter months underground. They mate before the females fly off to lay their eggs on the underside of young leaves, usually within the centre of the bush and hidden from sight. The young larvae hatch and start voraciously feeding on the leaves, working their way upwards through the bush and defoliating the stems whilst they rapidly grow. After 2 to 3 weeks, these caterpillar-like larvae, which are green with black dots, are fully grown, and they descend down into the soil to pupate. If conditions are good, another 2 generations can occur before the end of the year. Controlling gooseberry sawfly in an environmentally friendly way is relatively easy if you keep a regular eye on the bushes. Disappearing leaves will indicate the location of the larvae, which can then be removed by hand. Regular turning over the soil around the base of the bushes will also help by exposing the sawfly pupae to insectivorous birds and other predators.
You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website rootsandall.co.uk. Please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support the podcast. Because if you enjoy the show, please help it continue. I also have a GoFundMe where you can make a one-off donation. Even a one-off donation of £1 helps, and I'll be really grateful for your support. So please go to Patreon or GoFundMe and search for Roots and All Podcast.